Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today I'm actually going to get into telling you guys about a hobby of mine that I'm really into, probably one of my most favorite hobbies next to a few other hobbies I have, but yeah, so photography. Now, I always say on this channel that you guys need to have hobbies. It's very important. It's very important for your growth. It's important for socializing. It's important for you having something to connect with people on or about. And it's important for you just as a way to vent, to clear your mind, have something to get your mind off of the things inside your life that might be stressing you out or whatever the case is. But in addition to all that, as I've mentioned in the past, the day you reach a point in your life where you maybe aren't working, you retire, whatever the case is, you want to be able to have something that you can get into. There's a lot of people who sometimes continue working, not because they have to financially, but because they just don't know what to do with themselves. And they get to a point where like, I don't want to just sit at home all day. And if you have a hobby, you don't have to sit at home all day. If you have something like one additional hobby that I'm into is bike riding, things like that, you can go out every day if you want. If you reach that point of you retiring, go out every single day and go bike ride or whatever activity you like doing. In this case, photography. Even if you're not retired, like I said, just having something to do on your days off rather than just sit at home and watch TV all the time, it really helps. So I always advise that you guys get into some type of hobby. So in this case, I just wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into a hobby that was really big as far as inside my life and as far as something that I thought was very fun. And just really, it helped me a lot in terms of just my creativity, because learning about photography also helped me when we came to the age of video and things of that sort. And even the realm of content creation, I knew of it based on the backbone of how photography really spearheaded a lot of the content creation movement, specifically when they came around to the camera of the 5D Mark II, which I never owned, but every camera after that really was a part of that, because that pushed the movement to say you could have professional looking photographs or even video, specifically video after that point. Now, I never really dove into the hobby for the purpose of video, but I always liked it for the photography aspect. But like I said, being a part of that movement, you ended up learning and seeing that unfold when it was unfolding for the first time. So one thing I want to let you guys know right off the top, this is going to be an extremely long video. If you are not down for an extremely long video, I would advise you now to just kind of exit out and you can go off just the fact of I'm mentioning about hobbies and that you guys should get into one and that this is one of my favorite hobbies. If you're interested in staying tuned for the whole long drawn out, just kind of get yourself settled. If you want, you could do it while you multitask, because this is just going to be a very long video, because I'm just going to enjoy this long process of talking about where I started with getting into photography, where my journey was, how I acquired all these lenses in terms of what came first, where my mind was at when I was purchasing them, and so on and so forth. So first, I'm going to start with saying that I got into photography really in 2005. I purchased a camera from my cousin, who happened to have like a little hookup of easy access to like cameras and a couple other goodies that he was able to sell for a discounted price. So I was like, okay. So he happened to have a little Kodak camera as a point and shoot, but it was like almost like a hybrid camera, because it had like a zoom on it. It was small. It had almost like a SLR body. For those who doesn't know, SLR, single lens reflex, or reflect. Is it reflex or I believe it's reflex. So anyway, single lens reflex or digital SLR, DSLR, which is digital, because once we went from the era of digital, which all these are digital, then you went into that space. Now, this hybrid more like bridge camera was kind of something in between. It may have had manual controls. I don't know, because I didn't dive into it that well like that. I just know it had a lot of these preset modes and I would use them. And it was just the beginning of me getting into photography. But what was great about that is it let me learn about composure, composition. I'm sorry, composition in terms of framing my shot, in terms of just having that eye for what I wanted and being able to go, okay, I see what I want. This is how I'm gonna get it. So the camera surprisingly took really good photos, even though I never challenged it to really take photos at nighttime or anything like that. But it took really good photos in the daytime. I did all my shooting really in the daytime. Way before that, when I was younger, I used to always have a point and shoot, the disposable type. My parents would give it to me when I was running around, just getting into stuff. My mom was into photography when she was younger, and she had a Canon camera. I remember it, the old school SLRs. I never knew how to use it. I don't remember if I ever had a chance to shoot it or not, but that was kind of really me getting a sense of it. So my mom used to always just give me point and shoot cameras in my hand, like the throwaway ones, Kodak ones or whatever you'd have. There'd be some green one. I don't know if that was Kodak 2 or just some other brands they had out there where they'd be like just little tiny plastic thing. A lot of you guys remember from way back in the days, you find them at like just a corner store or a gas station. Just it had like maybe 24 shots in it. Just run around, shoot, and that was it. It was awesome. You had a little viewfinder in it that didn't show you what was on the screen, just a little hole in the upper part, and you just shot whatever you wanted to shot. Obviously, since those time frames, regular point and shoots have completely replaced that, and then now we have our cameras have replaced that our phones have replaced that even further. But that was the beginning. So that was in 2005 when I had that Kodak camera. Then in 2008 is when I got my first digital SLR, and that was this right here, the Canon Rebel XSI in America that it was known as, and in other countries it was known as the 450D, which I didn't know at that time, but shortly afterwards I ended up realizing that they had different names for different locations. And obviously you can see I've used this thing like crazy, but I always kept it mint because for me, I'm not the type who wants to ever bang up my stuff. I never dropped it. I was just always good about that. But it doesn't mean I didn't put it through its paces in terms of use. I got thousands of photos with this. I used to take so many photos. And one of the things that I used to do with this, which was always really fun, was I first got it. I read through the entire manual. And for whatever reason, it's funny because I'm not really the type who will get into like, say, fictional books, even though I love things like that in terms of like movies, fictional and this and that. I never could get into reading a long book, but in terms of a manual, I could sit down and read a manual and not get bored. I don't know why. So I went through everything, all the pages, all the functions. Then I would test the function. So I'd change the setting. I put this highlight tone priority, high ISO, noise reduction, blah, blah, all these different things. I put all these settings, I test them out. I even practiced when it came to the Trinity, the ISO, I read on it. Then I went, at the time, there were websites, you still have them now, like DP Review, which was a forum. So I jumped into that because whenever I get into a hobby, I like to jump deep into the space. So I got into that hobby. I got into that forum. I got into a couple of other websites that told me about the lenses and what this does and what that does. And I just really did a deep dive during the time of owning this camera when it was the only camera that I had. Now, I even tested out things like how do I freeze action? So I would run the faucet water. I remember in my kitchen at the time, I was living, at that time I wasn't living with my parents anymore. I was roommating. And I remember I went into the kitchen and I'm running the water and then I try to freeze it. So I get the shutter really high. And then if I want to make it look like it's running, I slow down the shutter. And I just got a really good sense of just how to navigate the camera. When my room was dark and I just had the light from the TV on, how steady could I hand hold to get like a really steady shot. I learned about image stabilization. This was the lens that came with it, the kit lens. And I learned about image stabilization, how it gave you maybe about, I think it was somewhere between like 3 or 4 stops of, camera shake. What that meant was that, say if you had to shoot at, and I don't know all the measurements off the top of my head, but say if you had in the darkness, say if you were going to shoot, let's say 1/125th of a second, 1 and 125th of a second, and you had to stop it down even further, you could slow the shutter down even more, say about maybe somewhere between 3 or 4 times the stops. I forget exactly what it was. And then that way you could do something maybe closer to like 1 1/25th of a second and still get the shot. Normally it was challenging, but you'd have to see how steady you could hold the camera. And I did so much practice. I got to the point where I was steady holding shots to where I could get a nice shot holding it 1/4 of a second. Just practicing and just really getting into it because the interest was just so high. And at the time, this was a new lens. So what was interesting, I came in at the perfect time. I was debating between this Canon and the Nikon D60. And the Nikon D60 had a lot of features that I really liked about it. It could do stop motion video, which at that time there was no such thing as video on a camera, but that did built-in stop motion video, which was really cool. And I was always a fan of stop motion video. I used to do it when I was younger. So I actually wanted to kind of dive into it. But then I was going back and forth. The Canon was a little bit newer. It had a couple of extra features on it, better burst rate at 3.5 shots per second rather than 3, bigger LCD screen, just a few other features that seemed like a little bit more, premium. And I'm glad I went with it, not to knock the Nikon at all, because if I would have gone that path, it just would have been what I knew. But this, after getting it, I realized that it was kind of the new kid on the block, which was very interesting. At the time, you had the 40D out as far as their mid-range spec, and that's when I started learning. You had the Rebel line, you had the XXD line, which in this case was the 40D. Prior to that was the 30D, and so on and so forth. They call it the XXD line just to indicate two numbers. Then you had the 5D line, which I believe was out at that time, or I think that came out in 2005. So it was out for a little while at that point, which was their full frame, more basic compact size, if you will. It wasn't compact, but in terms of this type of body style. And then you had like the 1D series, which I really didn't know anything about at that time. I didn't even know of the 5D series at that time, to be honest with you. I only knew of the 40D at that time. But that, later on I started to learn about all the different levels. And at that point, it was just interesting taking it all in. And then you also had separation of levels based on slightly older models. And what's funny is that, like I said, at that time I was roommating, I found out my roommate actually had the previous version of this, which was the 400D. I don't know what it was called as far as the American name, the Rebel, whatever. But it was the 400D. And he later on said, hey, do you want this camera? He saw I was getting into cameras, and maybe if he asked if I wanted to buy it from him. Maybe if he would have came to me before I bought this camera, I would have felt that way. But after I had this one, which was a better camera, I was like, no, I'm good. But it was just interesting because he tried to get in photography and it didn't last. Now, I just from that point on, I just kind of was doing all the research into all the lenses and learning different things. And I was like, I need more lenses. And I went on a binge. When it came to the lenses, and it kind of spiraled. And I definitely want to say to any of you guys who get into this photography, get into this hobby, don't spiral if you could avoid it. If you could avoid it, don't spiral. Because if I can go back in hindsight now, I would do things a lot differently in terms of what I purchased. First off, I probably wouldn't have purchased as many EFS lenses, not that I have a lot, but the reason why is because, so the EFS lenses, which is this type of lens, and you see it say EFS lenses. So on their crop body sensor cameras, so just, that's another thing too, for those who don't know, most people who are watching this probably know about this. You have full frame, then you have crop body, which the crop is a 1.6 times crop. It means that the focal length that you're getting, so say if this says 18 millimeters, on a full frame, that would be 18 millimeters. On a crop, this is 18 times 1.6. Now, I don't know what that equates to off the top of my head. Maybe something close to like, let's see. It's a 1.6, not a 1.5, but we'll say it's something like 9, just to make it easy math. 9 added to that, so somewhere about 27, 28 millimeter. So it's not as wide. That's the wider end. The 18 to 55 is the more telephoto end. Obviously, some of these go into a further telephoto. We'll get more into the lenses later, but essentially, the EF lenses, we'll get more into focal lengths later on, but the EF lenses were made for the crop cameras. They were a little bit more cheaper, more affordable, and they allowed for usually a wider focal range because you couldn't, so the EF lenses, which were just for full frame, usually they didn't go as wide, but they usually would go, say if they went on average, like considered a regular wide. Wow, this 18 is considered a regular wide for like a crop body. The regular wide would be considered on a full frame, like something like maybe 24 millimeters. But the problem at 24, 28 millimeters, depending on how the kit lens came, the problem was that was pretty wide on a full frame camera. You put that on a cropped camera, and the problem became that wasn't close to being wide. You multiplied that by 1.6, and now you're looking at something close to like maybe 40 millimeters, which wasn't wide at all for a wide angle lens. So the EFS lens is allowed it to get really wide for the crop bodies, like the Rebel and the XXD bodies, like the 40D. So the one that it came with, this was actually really good for, it had an upgrade because the previous older model wasn't as good. And this one had an upgrade in terms of the lens quality. The material was the same, but it was done in a fashion that looked nice. The buttons looked nicer. Everything about this was nicer. So this is great for a kit lens and starting off, had good magnification if I want to do macro. So it was great. But I probably, in hindsight, wouldn't have bought as many EFS lenses. But anyway, I did a search. I was doing this whole kind of deep dive. The next lens I ended up purchasing was this to go hand in hand with it. And this lens actually went hand in hand with this lens. And in some kit setups, they actually came together. Where this goes 1855, this carries over right from it to 250. And the truth is that 55 was actually a good starting point. Whereas on full frame, the full frame equivalent lens that was always tossed around was the 70 to 300. You had a couple different variations of it. One version that didn't have image stabilization, another version that did have image stabilization. And later on, they released an L version many years later. But at that time, that was a good telephoto lens for, you know, kind of mid-range, starting off, whatever the case is. But I opt for this one, which costs a little bit less. And the guy, I actually bought this at B&H at the time. The guy said this had better optics than that one because it was a newer lens. So even though the build quality wasn't as good, but the optics on it was better is what I was told at the time. A little bit of dust on here now. I haven't used this in a while, but this was actually great for nature and stuff like that. 250 on a crop sensor. The magnification was actually really good. And that was a great lens at the time, going into, like I said, that deep dive spiral. Now, shortly after that, which I really wouldn't have needed another telephoto lens, to be honest with you. I would have been good with that for any kind of wildlife I wanted to do in this and that. But like I said, the bug got a hold of me and I just wanted to get anything and everything. I was just over the moon. I'm like, I just want one of everything. I want something that could cover all these different extremes. So then I said, I said, I want to get a really long telephoto lens because I want to get nature super far away and you know, whatever the case is. And after this whole video is done, I'll like at the end of the video, I'll go back and tell you if I could have done it again, what lenses would I have purchased, which ones would I not? And then also too, I will even say to you guys, if I was starting new, where would I go with things if I was going within the EF range? And then now mirrorless has taken over and you have the R range, at least for Canon. And I'm gonna go specify on Canon because I really don't know too much details now coming into the future for a lot of the other cameras, especially Sony was very big, but I don't really know much about them in terms of the lenses, this and that. But what I will say is, I'm not going to switch over to mirrorless for photography. I don't really think there's a purpose because a lot of these cameras, which were used by professionals and whatnot, or for hobbyists and take great photos, they still take great photos. They may not be the bleeding cutting edge right now, but that doesn't matter because in those years, professionals used them for pro photos. The photos that you probably saw 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago were probably done by one of these SLR cameras, and they were amazing and you just thought they were amazing photos at the time. They can still do that. So I have no need to switch over, especially since I got such a huge lens collection. But anyway, so moving forward, I wanted something that was really good telephoto, very long range. I was looking at the L series 100 to 400 lens. The one thing that I didn't like about that was that to zoom, it was like a push and pull. You didn't even twist it. And something about that to me felt wrong. Getting used to these lenses and doing research and realizing that lenses, you can turn them to zoom. If you want to zoom, you turn them. And so something about that just didn't sit well with me. The fact that you would just push it and pull. But it was the only lens that I could see for Canon. I didn't know of any third-party companies yet that made lenses. So I went over to B&H. I was there like all the time. So I went over to B&H. And for those who don't know, it's a camera store in New York City that is very popular. They do shipping as well. And most of the time, their prices will match other online prices like Amazon, even though they have a storefront. So, but the difference also with them is that similar to Amazon, they have a great return policy, but they also are usually good at having good, I would say their quality for having used things are better because they usually give it a rating, an actual rating, rather than just say it's refurbished or it's renewed. They actually give a really like solid rating between like, I think the lowest I've ever seen is like 7. And then the highest is obviously like a 10. A 10 would be something that was sold. It never got used. The person returned it. And now they aren't going to put it as brand new, so they're going to still sell it as used, but it's considered brand new. And I actually got a lens that I'm going to show within this lineup that was that same way. Actually, it was this lens right here when I asked about it, and they pretty much told me, yes, it's brand new. It's never been used before. Came with all its box and papers and everything, even within its own wrapping. The only difference was that wrapping around the lens. The only difference is that someone purchased it, returned it, they never used it. So anyway, I was at B&H and I was looking at that 100 to 400 L lens. I'm like, oh man, I'm on the fence. I'm like, yeah, I don't like that push and pull feature, but this is their only lens, blah, blah. And then one of the guys at the store told me, and I'm so glad he said this to me. He says, listen, to be honest with you, he was like, you could get this Sigma. It got longer range. He says just as good. It's going to take just as good photos. And it costs like maybe $1,000 less than that one, or like almost half the price. It was a big difference. Like this was maybe about somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500. No, I'm sorry. This was $970 at the time, and the Canon was $1,500. And so it was like about almost, I won't say half the price, but it was considerably a lot, like 2/3 the price. And so I was like, wow, okay. He's like, yeah, it's really just as good. Now, in hindsight, is it as good? For those who pixel peep and do all that other kind of stuff, maybe it wasn't as exactly good. Will any normal person taking shots, taking pictures actually know the difference? No. Will someone on my level know the difference at that time, which I'm just a beginner, just learning things? No, I wouldn't. And the truth is that I feel that the real beauty of photography, once you get away from, because like I said, I got wrapped up into some of the forums too. I didn't really drink the Kool-Aid for everything that they said on them. But what you really realize is that when it comes to taking good photos, it has nothing to do with pixel peeping and how sharp it is. And if it's this and that, all the cameras are going to make the photo, if it's in focus, look pretty sharp. All of them are going to look good. It's just really a composition, you getting the thing you want. That's all that really matters. So I'm glad that worker at B&H told me that, and I didn't waste my money on the Canon. I love this lens. And even years later on, they made a different one, a remake to, it's funny, these ones had some weird, funny names to it. They had another one that I think they called like Godzilla or something like that. And the range on that one was, I think, 200 to 500 maybe. It was an older lens. And this one kind of replaced that one to a degree. This was the 150 to 500. And it was for a full frame. It had a hypersonic motor, which was, HSM. I believe it's hypersonic motor is what it stands for. That was Sigma's terms for their lens, where Canon used the term, I think it was ultrasonic motor or something. I forget, I'll see it on one of these lenses in a moment, but I'm not gonna look for it right now. The feel on this thing almost felt like a vinyl on the outside. It felt weird and like it gets scratched up really bad if I didn't handle it well. Luckily, I did handle it well. It came with a hood, which I have away right now. Normally I have it on it, but I didn't want to have it out here for this right now. And it came with the tripod mount. It came with this string. It comes with its own big case, really nice case that Sigma makes. This lens was awesome. And then what's interesting is this lens actually taught me a lesson too that I would later on get into, because at that time I used to walk around with my other lenses, and I wasn't sure which one to carry. I would run around with both lenses at the same time. The thread on this is for the lens is 86 millimeters as far as the opening of this. It's huge. It's awesome. I haven't used it in a while, so it's a little dusty and whatever. That thing probably needs to get wiped down too. The filters, I used to put filters on. Some people were against it. I wasn't, because you never know if it was gonna protect your lens. I used to actually have insurance on some of my lenses, not all of them, the ones that are expensive. But this lens here, I actually did drop one day when I was moving. It dropped while it was inside the case. The camera was in the little camera case. It's like this kind of little shoulder strap that shapes to the camera and the lens. This kind of little pouch type of case. And the whole thing fell from a high height. The filter at the tip broke, but luckily I still sent it in because I had insurance. They said no one's wrong with the lens. But there was some reassurance to me that even though the filter broke, I said to myself that would have been the actual camera lens if it wasn't the filter. Maybe that wouldn't have been the case, but that's just what I said to myself, and it made me feel better to think that. But anyway, do the filters sometimes cause some level of degradation in the quality of the photos? Maybe. Some people say that. Some people say it doesn't. High quality ones kind of really don't. I have in between ones. Some of them are good quality. Some of them are kind of like maybe a little basic. I have Hoya and Tiffin, and I've just got the one Canon one because that was the second lens I ever bought. But I don't care. To me, it makes me feel good having them on there. It makes me feel like more at ease that when it comes to cleaning them or whatever the case is, I can just wipe them down and not feel like I'm rubbing down the actual lens. So it's better peace of mind for me, at least. But anyway, so back to what I was getting at. Matter of fact, what brand is that on this one here? That is a Tiffin, yes. So one thing with this lens too is it actually has a lock mechanism, which is actually cool because that thing will otherwise zoom out when you have it tilted upside down and it's open. But you got to really hold that lens with both hands. But what I was going to say is the one thing that taught me when it came to photography was that I learned with that lens that one day I was going to take it out and I'm like, I can't bring a smaller lens to get other things. When I had these two lenses together, the two EFS lenses, I could do that and I'll swap them out. Had them in the case, I'll swap them out. I'm like, I can't do that with that big lens. And I'm like, I got to go out and I got to shoot just what I'm going to shoot with that lens. It's 150 to 500 on a crop body, which meant it was very telephoto, very long range. I am gonna, matter of fact, have a calculator right here, just do the math real quick for you guys just to know what range that actually equates to. 240 to 800. There really was no, like you're not getting wide shots with that. But it was okay because I took that lens to go outside. So if I need a wider shot, I could just back up. I knew my intended purpose on that was really kind of zooming into things and whatnot. And so just there was this one day I went walking around. So walking around in Manhattan, I actually was living in a part of Harlem. That's where I was roommating with at the time. And so I went off to like near the West Side Highway, park area alongside the highway. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go just today, just enjoy myself with this lens. That's all I'm doing with this lens. And I'm walking around. And it's just crazy because I end up seeing something that I've never seen before. For me, it was spectacular. Some of you guys might come across this all the time in terms of seeing it, but there were two aspects of the same thing that I saw, two aspects of it that in combination, I would have never thought I would see. One, I seen what later on I looked up to be a red-tailed hawk. It's not a falcon, it's a hawk, yes, not a falcon, so I get them mixed up. Red-tailed hawk and is it a hawk or is it a falcon? Now I'm confusing myself, but I believe it's a hawk. Red-tailed hawk which are native to the area of the lower tri-state area. On the East Coast, if you guys are not familiar or from someplace far away, the tri-state area is New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. So they're native to that area after I did my research and found out. But at the time, I seen one of those. And what was crazy was that he was actually eating on a New York City rat. So it was just kind of this embodiment of nature and New York in one. It was like the fusion of this is nature meets New York. This is New York's nature. I was going on a journey to photograph nature stuff, testing out this big lens that I just got. I played around with it here and there, but I didn't really go on a little adventure with just that lens alone and just kind of really go outside and really do it like that. And I did. I had the camera. This is why I had the little strap that's on it, because I didn't even have the camera inside a holder. I don't have a holder for it. That's why I kept the strap on it, because it's its own holder. I took that strap, I put it over my shoulder. The camera is attached to it. This camera right here, my XSI, my Rebel. I am out there and I have the camera top. I'm having a brain fart for the cap, the lens cap off the whole time, because I know I'm just gonna be shooting the whole time. There's no time to kind of be putting it back on and off, and I'm just out there doing my thing. And I come across that, and it's crazy. And what goes through my mind is I see it. I'm walking through this park, I see it, and it flies a little bit over my head and lands right in front of me, maybe about, I want to say, it couldn't have been no more than 50 feet away from me. So I start walking towards him, but he's so sure of himself that he doesn't get scared right away. And I get to the point of where I'm like about maybe I'm 30 feet away now. But mind you, with this telephoto lens, I am the equivalent of right in his face. So I'm able to zoom to get his whole body. I'm able to zoom in, then get up to his eyeball. It's the shots I got were amazing. And once again, that is where I also realized too, that difference between the Canon L glass and the Sigma, the guy told me, what he told me was 100% true. You couldn't tell the difference. I got used to, a little side note, I got used to, since I shot JPEG and I didn't want to shoot RAW, I didn't really know much on shooting RAW and processing and this and that, even though it came with the software for you to do it with the camera. I had learned the picture style. Picture styles are almost like, if you want to consider them, filters or something like that, that kind of give it different color parameters or whatever the case is for a certain purpose. And what I did is I went and customized every single one that I use, where you can make it a little more sharper, increase the sharpness, saturation, blah, blah. So I just say that to say all my things were exactly the way I want them to be. And I got really good at that, knowing what each picture style was going to look like before I shot it, because I was testing in my home on just random things. And so I ended up getting on, all my things were set to be very sharp with a little bit of contrast and an increased saturation. I love a nice saturation. So I say that to say that Sigma lens performed aces. The shots I got of that hawk was magnificent. I even put it on my wall one time when I was, living where I was living. Since then I moved, I got rid of my photos. I gave them away to family members, and I may print them out again. But I honestly, the photos were amazing. But also too, just taking in the scene, the hawk is sitting there eating up the rat. Little side note, later on, I ended up making, out of all those rapid shots, I was taking so many shots, I ended up making a stop motion video of the shots, putting them together, because I just kept blasting off. It was just so many, just seeing them there, I just kept blasting off all the shots. But just looking at the frame of it was interesting also, because he lands there. He's like on the left-hand side next to a tree. There's a tree right here on the left, then there's him. And then on the right-hand side, there's a squirrel a couple of feet away. And I'm looking at the squirrel like, do you know how dangerous of a situation this is? If he wasn't eating the rat right now, it'd be a problem. It was funny just taking in the entire scene. But then I'm watching him as he eats the rat. I'm seeing the rat, the guts are out and this and that. It's nature at its finest. And I don't know how I was blessed to be given that scene on the day I take this lens out. But my point to that also is that I went out with a mission to use this lens, and I got exactly what I was looking to find. But either way, I was gonna make it where whatever is in front of me, I'm using this lens and that's what I'm going to get it for. Obviously, I'm not going to really be able to get landscape shots with that in terms of wide landscape shots. I knew my hunt was whatever is going to be something I can focus in on is what I'm going to do it for, but I did, and it was amazing. Those shots are amazing. They're just really good shots. I will see if when I post this video up, if I can find them and maybe add them to this so you guys can see and post up a few of those with this, but they were really good. So one of the big lessons that I learned from that was take a lens, the one you want to use, and I didn't implement this as much right away, but it was take a lens that you're going to use and just go and rock with that one lens because you don't want to end up taking too many different things. I did end up using it right away at the time, but then when I got some more lenses later on, I started doing the whole double lenses again, and then later on I went back to just carrying a single lens. And I definitely recommend that. If you're ever going to go someplace and you're shooting photography as a hobby, and this is where I go back to saying, if I could do it all over again, I would refine the lenses that I buy to be more precise. But I would say find out what you want to kind of be your general purpose lens. Then you'll have a couple of specialized lenses. I don't recommend getting a whole bunch of specialized lenses for every little situation. But what I will say is that whenever you go to shoot, take one lens with you and just whatever you can get with that one lens, because it becomes very cumbersome and annoying to carry multiple lenses, and that will take you out of enjoying shooting. Take one lens with you for that day, and whatever you can get with that lens, that's what you get. You want to get, so if you bring out a wide lens, you want landscape, get landscape for that day. Oh, you see something that you would have wanted to zoom in on. Guess what? You walk back out there and you go back shooting again another day with a telephoto lens. Don't do the back and forth because it's going to be annoying. You're going to be constantly switching your lens. You're going to get all this dust inside your camera as well. It's annoying. You alternatively, some people just carry two camera bodies so that we could just switch one like here, one right here, like left and right real quick, like, you know, maybe on shoulder straps or whatever the case is. But that's annoying too, because now you're carrying this extra weight. My recommendation, one lens at a time, shoot what you're gonna shoot, go back out another day and shoot different stuff with a different lens. So anyway, fast forward, I now had this 18 to 55 EFS lens, the 55 to 250 EFS lens. I had the EF equivalent for the Sigma of the 150 to 500. The next lens I bought, I'm not 100% sure. I want to say that it was this one, but I don't think it's this one yet. No, I don't think it was this one yet. It was this one. This became I'm gonna try to remember when I bought this one. I think I do remember when I bought that one, but it became, and I'll get into that because that's gonna open up a whole new gateway. It was this, the 24-105. Now, this really was supposed to be made for a full frame camera, because its focal range 24 would be wide on a full frame camera, but on a crop sensor, it wasn't that wide. 24 millimeters equates to something like maybe close to 40. Let's see, 12-ish plus 24, so 36, maybe 38, because it's 1.6, not 1.5, so maybe like 38. So it wasn't super wide, but the truth is when you're outside, it was wide enough for me. It was wide enough for me because like you're outside, I can just step back if I need to get wider. But you know, sometimes we want wide just for the sake of being wide to get everything, but we don't even know what we're shooting. We're just getting wide to say, I want everything. I love this lens, and to me, it became one of my favorite all-purpose, general-purpose lenses, even on a crop body, because the wide angle was wide enough for me, at least. Some people may have not felt that way. They wanted something at least 18 or wider, some people would say, in the forums especially. 24 was wide enough for me. But I love that telephoto because you never know when you're going to see something that you need to zoom in on. And that 105 allowed me to not have to bring the 250 out or whatever the case is. It was wide enough that obviously you can walk with your feet if you need to zoom in closer. But 105 on a crop body was wide and was long enough, telephoto enough, that I felt like if something was that I needed to get an image of that I couldn't walk closer to because me walking closer to it was going to disturb it, like nature. I felt like 105 was long enough that I didn't have to get close enough to disturb it, but I could still get the shot I needed. I could walk up a little bit and get the shot I needed. So I felt like it just covered it so well, while still having good quality because it was an L lens. Because any other, what they call super zoom lenses, there were some that was like 18 to 200 millimeters. They usually have bad quality because when you have too much of a zoom range, you're sacrificing quality. The lower the zoom range, usually the quality is better. I love this lens, and the colors on the Canon, on the XSI, was so good. I remember taking a picture of my mom's cat at the time, and it was so good. The color's so rich and just nice that I was like, I couldn't even believe. I just took this regular shot and it looked so good and so dimensional. Steady f4 aperture. It wasn't, and at that time I understood that they had the 2.8 ones, and I could have got like a lens like that instead, the 2.8. One thing that was kind of fighting with this one in terms of, general purpose supremacy at that time was a 24-70 2.8, which at the time I was fine with f4 because I wasn't one of these people who was like, I need, super, I didn't understand the purpose of the shallow depth of field that much at the time. I understood it a little bit, but not to the level that I would understand it later. So at that time, I was more like, when it came to the purpose of low light, 2.8 is better for low light than f4. But my mentality was, I like doing mostly landscape. If I'm doing stuff that's living and moving, I do it in the daytime. At nighttime, the only thing I'm taking mostly at nighttime is like landscape stuff. And for that, this has image stabilization. And so I can handhold, because the 70 to 20, the 24 to 70 at the time had 2.8, but it didn't have image stabilization. So at that time, image stabilization wasn't something that was in every lens. It was kind of rare. So this had somewhere between, I think it's like 3 or 4 stops of image stabilization. So with that, I could handhold this. So to me, even though the 24 to 70 they were almost about the same price. They were a little bit different, but not by a whole lot. There was a difference, but it wasn't by a whole lot. I'm just realizing that my red ring on here is cracked. Wow. Well, that sucks. I hope that it holds together. Maybe I'll get some crazy glue and slip it in between there, and maybe it will never fade, because a lot of these lenses, you can't get them anymore without obviously getting them used. But, soon I won't be surprised if in a couple of years you can't get any of them ever again at all. So who knows? But anyway, so this was overall my favorite lens at one point in time. And overall, probably it got replaced as my favorite, I'll put it like this. It's my favorite lens because the most practical, even to this day, even using full frame, is still the most practical. Always be just my favorite lens in terms of practicality, but in terms of just one that I use the most, it wasn't my favorite in terms of what I use the most anymore. But at that time, it was. Like I said, I took that photo of the cat and it just looked amazing to me. And I just saw like there's so much I could do with this lens. It just could do everything. And an f4 is still not bad for shallow depth of field if you isolate your subject away from the background naturally. There's no background right behind them. It's gonna blur. So this was just, I was getting so many great images with this. It was my L lens, but then I said to myself, well, let me get the 1-2 combo by purchasing the 70 to 200 millimeter white lens, because that was, even though they're really like kind of cream color, but this was a thing with Canon, especially with sports players and professionals on the line for getting sports, was having the white series L lens, because when you seen them, the purpose of it was to reduce heat, because if people were taking photos in sports events and in hot weather, it reduced the heat by reflecting it rather than all the rest of the lenses being black. But it also then came with this kind of notation of like, oh, you're a professional because one of these lenses is supposed to be expensive and they use it for whatever. Now this was probably one of the more affordable. So this lens here came in 4 different iterations. You had the 70 to 200, you had the f4, then you had the f4 with image stabilization. You had the 2.8, then the 2.8 with image stabilization. For me, this was the f4 with stabilization. So it was the second from the bottom. Kind of priced somewhat close to the 2.8 without image stabilization. And this had ran me, well, that one at the time ran me 1,200. This one ran me 1,000, I believe at the time. So it was a little bit on sale, I think, or a little bit, the price was kind of coming down a little bit. And I didn't use it much, to be honest with you. I actually didn't like the focal range. I like it a little more now than I did then. But at the time, the reason why it bothered me was because my mind couldn't wrap itself around, like I said, the things that I shot, 4.0 or having a steady fast aperture didn't mean as much to me at that time. It did for that lens because the 24 to 105, because I used that one more indoors. This would have been used more for outside. And outside, I was like, I didn't really need that. This had better focal range and was lighter. So to me, I was like, I just bought it to say I got an L lens. But after I bought it, I was another L lens. But after I bought it, I was like, I don't really, and side note, like I was trying to get into earlier, if I could do it all over again, there's certain things I wouldn't buy. I don't recommend buying things that you just really don't need. But I bought this and I didn't use it much. Now I actually love that I have it, and I plan on using it a lot more for my nature photography, especially now that I've gone to full frame with this camera here, and I'll get into that later in a bit later on in the video. That this right here for full frame, being that you can't use this for full frame, and that is just too heavy sometimes, the Sigma, to run around with. This now has a bigger place in my lineup now. But at the time, and with that lens, it just didn't seem like it made that much sense. So I didn't really use it much. So at the time, I kind of regretted purchasing it. I was like, if it went to 300, that'd be great. 70 to 300, that'd be great. But at this point, it didn't really make sense to me. A lot of the other benefits that come with this lens that I couldn't appreciate at the time as much, I started to, because that lens used to have a lot of lens creep though, 24 to 105. What that means is that when you had the lens facing downwards, it would start zooming out on its own, under its own weight. This right here has internal zooming. So when I do this to zoom, nothing's moving. And so that's another nice benefit. But I bought that, I didn't use it much. It actually could become it actually, like I said, has more use now, because I'm gonna get into a couple other lenses I purchased later on. This one could also double for a good portrait lens, because a good focal range for portraits is usually somewhere around 85 to 100 millimeters often for people. Now on a crop sensor, that's overkill for portrait, but on a full frame, that's actually pretty good and will cover you. And f4 is a good amount of a shallow depth of field for portraits, depending on the background setting or whatnot. But in general, you don't always have to have everything super blown out, the background being super blurry. So it actually works for a good portrait lens if I didn't have other better portrait lenses, which, like I said, going back to what I said, if it was up to me and I had to condense my lens lineup, I would surely probably end up using something like that for portraits, as opposed to having some of the other ones I have for portraits. But once again, now that EF lenses, the EF mount in general, they aren't being made anymore. Getting rid of any of your lenses is like almost a no-no now, because you'll never be able to get them back. Almost like you could buy them used, but why get them used again when you already have them and you were the first owner? So shortly after that, what I ended up buying was this lens here, because then I discovered macro. And at the time, there was only two macro lenses. There was like a 50 millimeter or 55 millimeter or 60 millimeter, I think it was, EFS lens. And then this one, which is EF for full frame. And I started saying, I want to get most of my lenses, if I can get them at the full frame type, just in case if I ever went to full frame, I could. And it didn't matter to me because it didn't really make a difference much. So I bought this 100 millimeter macro lens, 2.8. What's interesting is, other than the macro aspect of this lens really served me no purpose. And I say that because at the time I wasn't really doing portraits of anybody. That I was just mostly doing landscape photography, nature photography. So it didn't really serve me much of a purpose other than the macro aspect, which I loved. I loved going to get macro shots when I could. But the problem with running and gunning with this lens by itself is that outside of the macro, it's not very versatile. Now, if it was, say, maybe 50 millimeters, it'd be even better. But yeah, I bought it just for the macro. Like I said, I was in this spending spree where I was just like, I got to get a lens just for the sake of it does that specific thing. This cost at the time, I want to say it was about somewhere between 600 and 800. I can't remember exactly, maybe 650. So I bought this. The other one was a little bit more cheaper, but it was the EFS lens. And I was just like, well, this one's should be better because it's the EF lens and it's 100 millimeters, so it should zoom in better, even though in theory that doesn't work like that. But I thought it made it better. Ultrasonic was the name of the lenses, like I said before. What's funny is the kit lens actually has really good macro capabilities, not as good as the macro lens, but because this is specifically a macro lens, which is why it says macro at the top. This one actually has good macro capabilities in how close it could focus. And I honestly could have just got away with using this and then just cropped in to do macro. You really, like, so macro is supposed to be 1-to-1, meaning what you're seeing in the lens and what you're getting in that field of view is the 1-to-1 size of it. But you know, us using digital now, it didn't really occur to me even at the time, and I'm just realizing this now. It occurred to me after the fact that I could crop in. But one thing that's occurring to me right at this second is that the purpose of a macro probably more so was for when you didn't have digital cameras, because these lenses were made to fit on film cameras before the time of digital. They just also worked on digital. On film days, you couldn't zoom into a photo that you took. So macro probably had more meaning. Once digital came, you just simply can crop in or zoom in. And so it kind of eliminates the purpose of macro, but this lens already did decent macro. It's like 2/3 of what this did. So I didn't really even need to, but at the time I didn't realize. And I used it on a couple of good shots, but to be honest with you, I didn't use it that much. And in hindsight, I didn't try to say, well, I could also use it for portraits, but I really wasn't enjoying it for portraits. Yeah, I didn't do portraits heavy, but I started like doing every now and then, shoot family members. I didn't really like it for that because on a crop sensor, I'm still using the XSI at the time, my Rebel. This zoomed in way too much. It was like about 150, 160 when we did the equivalent math, and it was just way too much. So so I stopped using that one for a good amount of time. Like I said, I tried to play around with it for portraits, but I didn't really do a lot of portraits, so I kind of stopped playing around with it at a certain point in time. Now, the next lens, and this is where things got crazy. Enter the 50mm Nifty 50 1.8. This lens was stupid. This was crazy to me. This opened up doors that I was just like, what is going on here? I don't know. I read on the forums and I hear people talk about it. At first I didn't have an interest in it because I said to myself, well, I have 55 right here, so why do I need this? Yes, it's 1.8, but I was like, I mostly do, like I said, landscape, this and that. I cared more about image stabilization than I did about fast apertures, like ones that open up wide. Disclaimer: if you don't know, the lower the number, the wider the aperture. The aperture is the hole that brings in light. So this did 1.8. Right there, 1.8. I grabbed this lens. I was like, why not? Everyone says get it. It's really cheap. It should give me some blurry background. It could be kind of like how other people do their stuff. Maybe I'll see how much I like that. But I was like, I sometimes get blurry backgrounds with an f4 depending on the setup and the situation. So I'm like, shouldn't be a big deal, X, Y, and Z. I popped this thing on there. I took a couple photos. Everything looked magical. The background was blurred out completely. It was amazing. I was like, what is going on here? I remember I met up with my cousin one day. We were just talking. I bring my camera everywhere. So we're just, just meeting up, just having fun, meeting up with family. And he was into video stuff at the time. And I was getting, obviously, heavy into the photography. And I showed him, I took a picture of this. He was like, wow, look like you're like a professional, like just from the photo. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, this lens makes you look like a professional. That's it. You get this lens and you're a professional. It was amazing. The build quality sucked, but it worked great. The focusing was great. Everything on it was perfect. It worked. It didn't matter that it was cheap. When you focused, it makes this part zoom out, which is kind of a little funny because that puts weight on the tip of the lens. So if you ever had to, like, say, put your camera face down, sometime I did that, like if I'm holding it like it's in a bag or something like that, you kind of feel funny because I put it on manual. So that way, if it had to decompress, you aren't going to hurt the motor to this thing. This thing can't do, some of these more higher end ones can do manual focus while it's in autofocus mode. This one can't. So, that was something to watch out for. But nonetheless, that's why they called it the Nifty 50, the Plastic Fantastic. You know, it was this cheap bargain lens that the image quality was amazing. And this was the newer version of it at the time. So it took really good photos. Now, because of that is why I had said to myself, well, now I want to start using primes a whole lot. I started using that all the time. I started going places where I just would take that with me. And I was like, I wouldn't even take anything else, just a 50 millimeter prime. Like I said, there was a point in time where I started going back to the whole doubling up the lenses. But when I got that, it was like, no, it's just that, because nothing else was giving me the aperture. So I'm like, this is all I'm using. I would then later on go back to carrying two lenses again when I got some more primes, and I'll get into that in a second. So I ended up saying to myself, okay, I'm going to need more prime lenses because this focal range is not really working for me. After I got over the hype of it, I realized the problem wasn't the lens anymore. I was always cool with the lens, but after I got over the hype, I realized, yeah, there's a big problem. That big problem is this focal range of 50 millimeters is just too long. On a crop body sensor, it's the equivalent of 50 millimeters. I'm like, I can't. The place I wanted to use that most often was indoors because of the fast aperture. It was able to bring in more light than any of the rest of my lenses. So of course, the place I want to bring it the most is indoors, especially when if I'm outside doing nature photography. I use image stabilization. I can handhold. I don't need the fast lens. I needed the fast lens for shooting people. You shoot people indoors. What's the problem indoors? I can't back up. So that 50 millimeters wasn't wide enough to cover my view. I could usually get, most of the time on average, as wide as I can get was probably like shoulder shots. I can get from like around your shoulders and up to your head. And that was really about it. Most of the time I couldn't really get somebody's like, you know, the rest of their body. I couldn't even get down from the top of their head to their waistline. So I was like, man, and sometimes I try to, I back up as far as I can, but then I hit a wall. So that part sucked. So I said to myself, with this dilemma, my next issue now is I need to find me a wider lens and a more telephoto prime lens. I didn't really need the telephoto prime lens, but with all that time on the forums and watching videos and reviews and this and that, I realized I was like, everyone has this trinity of primes. And for the people who had full frame, big time cameras, and around that time is when I think I don't know if, yes, I want to say around that time. So I think it was close to around that time, the 5D Mark II was coming out, that came out in 2008. So around this time now, I think that either just dropped or it was about to come out. Yes, it was just coming out. I remember now because I actually, I had went back to school. I took a break from school. I started working. I went back to school. Well, I was already working, but I took a break from school before that. And then I went back to school. And then I remember taking a photography class just for the fun of it. And I remember the instructor was telling me, oh, you know, like you seem, because he knew I knew all about camera stuff and this and that. And I had a couple of nice lenses by that time. I already had my L lens, this and that. That he was like, oh, I figured you would have the 5D Mark II, because he had the 5D Mark I. So that's why I remember that the 5D II was out by that time when I was doing this now new quest for other lenses. So my prime trinity, because what happened is a lot of people who are shooting with, like, say, the 5D Mark II, the 1D series, they always, who use primes, they had their trinity. And most of the times, and they were big timing it and they had L lenses, they usually had the, I want to say it was either the 24 millimeter 1.4 or the 35 millimeter 1.4. It was either one of those two lenses. They usually didn't have both, but it was one or the other. Then they would have the 50 millimeter 1.2, and then they would have the 85 millimeter 1.4. And so I was like, I need to form a little trinity of my own. So I already had the 50 millimeter Nifty 50. I was like, I need something wider, and then why not, in addition to that, get something a little more telephoto, so that way I can do portraits if I want to do portraits. Because like I said, I want to cover every basis at this point. I wasn't thinking correctly. I really didn't need that. This kind of doubled for that same purpose, the macro lens at 2.8 at 100. And they did end up covering the same focal ranges once I got them, which became a problem. And then I could have also done that with this one, even though it was f4, still would have been decent for portraits. But anyway, I ended up getting the 85 1.8, which was a really good lens at the time. The quality of it was so good. It was L lens quality in terms of its images. And I got the 28 millimeter 1.8, which was said to be a not so good lens. I'm actually frustrated that just the other day I picked this up, because normally I have the hood around it. I picked this up just the other day because this wasn't the case maybe just not even a year ago, and it's getting sticky around the ring, the zoom ring, and that usually happens when when the rubber starts to decay. Unfortunately, now you could wipe it off with rubbing alcohol. I tried that and it made it a little bit better. I tried that a little bit earlier today, but it bothers me that it's getting to that point. Personally, when you see it like this, I know that makes it more brittle and when it starts getting to that point where it gets ashy, but I almost would prefer that than sticky, at least to the touch of the hand. But anyway, that's a little off topic. So this became my trinity: 50, 28, 50, and 85. Right away, I can tell you right now, the 85 cost me, I want to say this was like $3.99, and this one was maybe about $3.50. This was supposed to be considered really sharp, really good, and I'm sure it was. I didn't use it all that much. This was supposed to be very soft on the corners. The middle was supposed to be pretty sharp. And on a crop, none of that mattered, because the crop cut out the edges, because on a crop sensor you weren't getting the edges, you were just getting the center, and on a full frame is where you kind of run into those issues. But like I said before, in the grand scheme of things, I never cared about those things because I never saw them, because it never affected really my shots, because I shot JPEG and it wasn't that serious to me. So anyway, out of all three of these lenses, this is supposed to be the best lens. I never really used this one at all. This one I stopped using almost altogether. And this became the replacement. Why? Because at 28 millimeters on a 1.6 crop, this became 44, roughly about 44 millimeters. This became, and they normally say on a full frame, 50 millimeters is a regular focal length, similar to what your eye sees. This kind of took that place, was smack dab in the middle of 24 and 35. So a lot of the ranges that a lot of people would deal with, this was, better than. Now, around the same time that I purchased this, I think they were coming out with, or shortly after that, they were coming out with a 28 2.8, which I didn't think made sense. Because this lens, even though it was older, maybe it wasn't considered as sharp or whatever, just the dynamics of it just made more sense to me. I love the build quality of this too. It was heavy, more so than the Nifty 50. And this, there was a 35 millimeter 2.0 that was out. This was a bit wider, so it suited me more. So I was trying to compare between some of the other options, but this is what I landed on. And I really love that I landed on this. And I love this lens. People say it's not all that sharp. I love the colors that it produces. I love like the feel of it. I love the size of it because it's not that big. A lot of people during around this time frame was purchasing the 50 millimeter 1.4 as their get around lens and stuff like that for their prime lens. But this was a better focal length. They were similarly built, but I think this one was built a little bit better because the motor on this thing was a better motor on it, because the other one said ultrasonic, but I think it wasn't the same as the ultrasonics. It said ultrasonic, but it wasn't quite the same mechanics as one. And on top of that, like I said, the focal range was just better, and it was just great. I love this lens and I use it all the time. This would be my one lens to carry all the time at that point. I used to sometimes carry this with this one, just in case if I needed that long range to do a portrait or something like that, but I never end up using it. And then eventually I stopped carrying it. This one I carried everywhere. It was amazing on the XSI. And Everywhere I went, I carried it. It was just a perfect lens on a crop body. I still think to this day, many lenses came afterwards were still not better than it. There are some lenses later on, before they went to mirrorless, that compared to it. There was a 35 2.0 with image stabilization, which is great. But I think this the wideness of this just still worked a little bit better. But that is a great setup. They also later on came out with the Sigma. It was for crop body sensors, EFS equivalent. Famous for everyone doing video now. My cousin has the same lens, 18 to I think it's 35 millimeter 1.8. So it's a zoom lens that acts as a prime. Focal range wise, that is better than this. Size of this wise, I still love this lens so much because it's just so small. So easily able to run around with it. What was great is that later on when I went to full frame, this Trinity now was that same equivalent that people used to use who had full frame back in days when I still had my Rebel, when I was using my Rebel. And I now had that lineup transitioned right over. And once again, now they still say that it has soft edges. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Most of the time when I'm taking photos of this, it's mostly about what's in the center anyway. So that became the lineup that I used most of the time. At this point now is when I got my next new camera. I don't have it on me right now. It's actually in storage, but it was the Canon 60D. Now, no, I'm sorry. Before I got the 60D, I got a 50D, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it because it felt nice, but I knew the 60D was about to come out, and I bought the 50D anyway, even though I think at that time I knew the 60D was coming out, so I don't even know why I did. I bought the 50D, and I bought a 30D slightly before that, but I didn't like the image quality of it. The ISO range to me looked bad. I think I had a bad copy though, because I posted online. People were like, yeah, those pictures, they look bad at higher ISOs. The XSI to me, and I wasn't like one of those snobs about stuff like that, because the XSI only went to 1600, but at 1600, I love the images that it produces at 1600. I have no problem with them. And I really became a believer that a camera shouldn't push super high ISOs if it can't handle it. I'd rather know that it can do a clean ISO rather than push really high and it's bad. But coming from the camera I didn't really learn that, because this one, the highest it can go, it was good at what it could go at 1600. So I had the 50D. When I bought the 60D, I gave the 50D away to a family member because I just didn't, it bothered my brain to have a camera that I didn't want to use sitting there, because now I had the 60D. Though I used both the 60D and the 50D for a wedding. My first wedding ever is a family member's wedding. I did it for free. So I was no expert, but I was glad to be able to help. They enjoyed the photos. I was glad for the practice. So that was cool, and I used both of them. But for JPEGs, and I only shot JPEGs, for the wedding I shot actually RAW and JPEG. I never used the RAW. But anyway, the 50D at 3200, it was okay, which I guess is cool to be doing 3200 ISO and still looking pretty clean. It wasn't bad, at least for my standards. It was okay. It wasn't super clean, but it wasn't bad. At 6400, it was so bad. It's now 6400 was considered its high. Its high was considered 6400. And I want to say that its high was 6400, and it had a high, a H2, a high 2 that went to, I think it was 12,800. I believe that camera went up to that range, if I'm not mistaken, which also looked really bad. But the 6400 also, to me, looked really bad. 32 was its native high, and that one looked pretty decent. The problem where I couldn't wrap my head around with that camera anymore, the camera body, the way it felt was great. It actually was the same as this 40D, which we're going to get into a little bit later, because this is the latest camera I bought, and I'll get into why and what was everything behind that. But I had the body felt nice, rugged, all that kind of stuff. But the problem to me was that the 6400 ISO being really bad, and me having the 660D, which for me, the 6400 ISO was clean. For my liking, for my taste, JPEGs. It was clean. It was usable. I liked it. In camera noise reduction was on, yes, but it still made it, I enjoyed it. So for that reason, and if your exposure was correct and everything like that, to me, it was usable. It was great. It made it hard for me to digest the 50D. I couldn't. So what happened was I gifted it to a family member. In hindsight, I almost wish I would have kept it because I bought it brand new. It was a good value. I think I paid like $900 for it at the time. I really enjoyed it in terms of everything else about it. And I think I would have enjoyed it also for the fact that it was the last camera of that line. Its true successor, spiritual successor, was the 7D, which came out around the same time as the 60D. The 60D came out slightly after it, but they're roughly around the same time. And that was the division of the 50D's line. The 50D line, and I'm just showing this for the purpose of letting you guys know what a 50D would have looked like, because it looked exactly the same as this, but just, some different specs. But the 50D line then was the last, which got divided into the 60D and then the 7D. The 60D became a little bit more like the watered down version of the 50D in terms of the way the body looked, and the 7D became more of like the similar body type, but jumped up in specs, and it was kind of like, so the line got divided into two different lines essentially. And yes, and that's when you kind of expanded on Canon's camera lineup. But so, like I said, the 60D, I end up loving it. I put this lens on it most of the time. I loved it. I loved the features on it. It actually felt like the perfect camera for me because me using my Rebel for so long, it felt like it gave you Rebel easiness. Even the buttons on the top, instead of being multifunctional like this, where you have 3 buttons, we're not going to include the light button. You have 3 buttons that had double functions. So you have 6 functions. The 60D had 4 buttons, but each with an individualized function. So you didn't have to worry about, does this thing have like 2 functions, and am I using the right wheel? Because you have the wheel on top that used one function and the wheel in the back that did a different function. They both did the same thing on the 60D. They were essentially the same lineup as the way it is like here, the 4 buttons that you see here. So it made it really good. And with that one having a little notch on it, you already could know from feeling it where the rest of them were and what they were. So we'll jump into this camera a little bit later. But so I love that camera. It was perfect. On top of that too, is the first camera with the flip out LCD. Wasn't a big deal to me, but at that time, you're also the first time you're doing video because the camera, the Canon 5D Mark II was the first one doing video. So that was like the second camera doing video. And no, I'm sorry, it wasn't the second camera doing, the 7D was the second one doing the video, and the 60D was the third one doing the video, but the 60D became so prominent because of the flip out LCD screen was so helpful. But I love that camera for the photography. I really didn't do video with it, really. I played around with it, but for the photography, it was great. The ISO was great. I loved all the things about it. The features in it were great. They had a lot of playful features too for the enthusiasts. Like for example, you had toy camera. It was an effect that made things look like they were small items by blurring out the upper part of the frame and the lower part of the frame and making the center just what's in focus. So it made it look like you're looking at miniature things. You had in-body editing. So if you shot raw, you could edit it in the camera and then push it out like that. And even though granted that would be the almost same thing as you just shooting the JPEG in the first place, but allowed you to figure out those differences after the fact. Not that I ever used it. I played around with it one time before, but still, or it allowed you, instead of shooting JPEG and RAW, which you could do by editing the RAW in the camera, you can now export it as JPEG. So if you shot all of RAW, but now wanted to show or export a couple of JPEGs, you can edit the RAW into a JPEG on the camera. And then that way, if you needed to, you can take them off the SD card as the JPEGs. So it was a couple of different options that you had with that, which was nice. One of the features they got rid of was the autofocus adjustment, which allowed the 50D had that, and a couple other cameras had it where I think the 5D Mark II had it, and a few other cameras where it allowed you, and the 7D had it, where it allows you to kind of adjust to kind of really like punch in the autofocus of a specific lens. So that way it was like more tack sharp or operated better with that lens if that lens focusing was a little off. And I think this also worked with Sigma lenses as well, that I remember. But that feature was removed, but I never had any problems with my 60D. So for me, it always was tack sharp and worked as far as the as far as the autofocus. And I actually was a big fan of the focusing points on that too, because it still kept with the 9-point autofocus, but similar to the 40D and the 50D, the 60D had all cross type, whereas in the Rebel line, you just had the center focus point was cross type, all cross type, the rest weren't. In layman's terms, it didn't make that much of a difference if you weren't some kind of sports shooter or this and that, but I still just liked having just 9 autofocus points. Even to this day, I like having 9 autofocus points. The 7D had 19, which was a lot at the time. They're all cross type. I wouldn't maybe mind that in today's range, but I don't like having a lot of autofocus points because I'm still just very old school when it comes to shooting pictures and photography. I don't like things having too many features. I don't mind some new features, but when it gets overwhelming, I just don't prefer it. It takes away from it to me because you start going through your brain of, should I use this feature? Should I not? Which is why even to this day, this is the most comfortable camera that I shoot with. But anyway, so the 60D felt perfect to me and I loved it. Everything about it was just perfect for me and for my shooting. Shot that for a long time. And that pretty much was my latest camera up until 2018. But in the meantime, I ended up saying to myself, I want a lens that can get even wider. I really want to dive into landscape photography even more. I want to really hit this really hard and just enjoy it. So what did I do? I ended up, let me put these ones back really quickly. Where was this? That was here. That was here. I have no clue where I had this lens, so I'm just gonna throw these things around a little bit. And so with the 60D, I ended up buying the Sigma because it was the widest lens you could get while still being good quality too. This was a new lens that came out for EFS type of lens. Sigma's equivalent of an EFS. This is why it says on it DC, where the ones that are full frame was like DG. So this lens was just shy of before they started releasing art lenses. But if this came out during the time they released art lenses, this would have probably been called an art lens. Very clear, like the image quality on it was amazing for the time. The only negative was that the aperture was a 4.5 to 5.6, but if you were using for landscape, none of that mattered. On top of that, you're often using it as widest end, so it was 4.5. It was a toss up between Tamron had a lens that was like the 11 to 28 millimeter, I think it was 11 to 16 millimeter, but it was 2.8. So if you wanted a wide that was a little bit faster, you would go for that. There was there was another lens and I forget which one it was. And then you had the Canon, the typical Canon that was probably closer to this price range was the L series 17 millimeter. That was not even close to being wide enough. That's wide for full frame, but it wasn't wide for this. The equivalent on Canon would have been like super expensive. So at the time, this was like really like the only really super wide lens. And this was 8 millimeters. And on top of that too, even though it's not internal focusing, it's not internal, internal zooming. But what it was because of this built-in like little pedal, why am I having a brain fart? Lens hood, when you zoomed, it moved, but it didn't protrude outside of this range. So it was the equivalent of having internal zoom mechanism because it was never gonna go outwards. Now the problem was that you couldn't put a filter on this. There was ways you could put a filter on it by put filters on it by doing this, and then now you could put a filter inside here, which was kind of cool. But at the same time, you start losing some of your focal view because at the widest end, it's gonna get some of this lens cap in it. But this was a nice idea to do this like this because it gave you protection. Allow you to use filters if you needed to. It was really kind of a good idea. I didn't use it because I was always at the widest end. And sometimes I'd go into 10 because at 8, you had a lot of, if your image was slightly even off, you can get a lot of distortion. So you had to pinpoint exactly what you're looking at. Most of the time, if you're outside and you're getting a lot of stuff, it wasn't a problem. If stuff was a little too close, you can go down to 10, and then now you got rid of that. But the focal range on this thing, the focal wideness was so good, and the clarity, it had all these spherical elements and coding. It was just an amazing lens for the price. I want to say I paid something like $600 for this, 600, 650 maybe. Somewhere between $600 and $700 maybe, whatever the case is. But this lens was great, and I started taking so many landscape photos of this. Amazing. The shots I got with this was amazing. If I'm able to include photos, like I said, I'm going to try to include one that I have that is off of the George Washington Bridge. It's a nighttime photo, super nice. And yeah, like you were just able to get I love landscape stuff. So this just took that to the next level, getting those wide shots, and they're great for blowing up into poster form and whatnot. This was amazing. Little sidebar, I actually joined Costco because of their photo program, because at the time you couldn't buy large prints without spending like $80 or more. Costco did 20 by 30 prints for like $9. It was amazing, and it was good quality too. Now, since that time, a couple of years back, they now outsource their stuff to be connected with Shutterfly. It's still cool, but the problem is you still gotta pay. You gotta pay for shipping. If your order is big enough, I think you don't. You do get the Costco discount when you go to Shutterfly, which is like about 40% off of Shutterfly's normal prices. But it's still not the same as going into Costco, putting in for your prints, do your shopping, and when you come back to the photo booth, your prints are done, and you walk home with like 20 by 30 prints. It was amazing. But anyway, so I just want to throw that in there, especially once I got doing those landscape shots. I really started getting into printing a lot of the big ones because I loved it. But so from that point, I honestly, I did not purchase any newer lens for a long while. I didn't purchase anything new for a long while. And I actually fell out of photography for a bit after a couple of years of that. I was shooting like that for a while. I had my lens lined up. I was good. I was shooting for at least a couple of, maybe, I don't know, at that point in time, maybe another good like 3 years of shooting. So maybe up until 2013-ish, maybe. Right in between that though, I would still try to get certain family members, stuff like that, into photography sometimes. So what I would do is I would buy older cameras, and this was one of them. One time I bought a 20D. I think I bought two 20Ds before, and I gave them away or something like that to family. I got a older Rebel put away. It doesn't feel right. The rubber on it is sticky. It feels bad. I don't even want to deal with it anymore, actually. But it was meant to be given away. But I bought this, and it didn't come with a lens. But the problem was I didn't realize the difference between the 10D and the 20D is the 20D could take EFS lenses like these, which were cheaper, cost less. You can get them for a good deal. And EF lenses, which the 10D only took EF lenses. So the problem became I needed to buy an EF lens if I was going to give this away to a family member. I was planning on giving it away to a family member. So what I ended up purchasing was this Tamron. It's probably it was the cheapest autofocus EF lens that you could buy at that time, period. Brand new. This thing I want to say ran me maybe like $50, 45 or $50. I never used it. I looked up a review on it just the other day. It says it's probably one of the worst lenses ever, and I believe it. I then used it just the other day on this, maybe like 5 days ago, on this Canon 10D. This lens is horrible. But for someone who's just playing around, beginning, having fun, they could use this, and I think that it would be fine. So, you know, it was one of those lenses that you really aren't going to give away unless you're giving away with the body, because no one would even want this lens unless they're getting a free camera and they're brand new to photography. But other than that, it's a really bad lens. That's why I purchased that, and that's why I have the 10D. I never really used it, and just the other day I actually started putting it through its paces a little bit, and surprisingly, it takes really, really good photos. Even it goes up to ISO 1600 expandable to 3200. Even at 3200, I like these photos, and I like even the 1600, they look good to me straight out of the camera, JPEG. The only thing that's a little bit tough for me to deal with is it has a parameter setting, which is like the equivalent of picture style, which later on other cameras would have picture style. This has parameter. So you can't really change a bunch of different things on it. So it's really just shooting straight out of the camera on standard mode. You can otherwise change these parameters that they aren't picture style. So only one picture style here is called standard. The other one is there's Adobe. And then there's just you adjusting to parameters. So it just says something like, I forget what it's called, but something 1, 2, and 3. And they're like a custom, for lack of a better word, because I forget what the word says on it. It's like custom. And let me see. Okay, so you see that there, standard, and we click into a set. And so you can change these parameters on these. If I go to setup, it allows you to change them. So, and I've done that on this one. The contrast, the sharpness, and even to the degree that you could change them is not as much as you could do on the more modern cameras that came out afterwards, even my Rebel. But yeah, it gives you a little bit of play, but I just keep it on the regular standard. But it takes really good, clean photos. It's very interesting. So I actually, just in the last week of me playing around with this camera, I actually really started liking this camera because I started watching a lot of videos on old cameras like the 5D Mark I, and how they say it's got like this kind of photo, it's almost like digital photograph, digital film. And so I almost felt like, let me test out that 10D, and it has that same vibe a little bit, at least in my opinion, but I don't know. So in 2018, I ended up buying the Canon 6D Mark II. And the reason why was because I wanted to get back into photography. This camera dropped. It kind of was a perfect camera for me because it was almost like the full frame evolution of the 60D. And in addition, because it was the first of its kind, there was a 60 Mark I, obviously, but the 60 Mark II was almost the same thing as what the 60D brought when it first dropped. It was the first camera with a tilt swivel screen. This was the first full frame with a tilt swivel screen, and it almost was like its spiritual successor to the 60D in full frame mode. And so I liked it. One problem though is that they claimed that the 6D Mark I had better image quality. I don't know if that's true or not because I've never handled that. But in terms of all the features and functions of this was primarily like the ideal camera for me. It still is. I actually think that it's one of the best cameras that Canon has ever made functional wise. I'm not going to necessarily say image quality, even though I think any camera can give you good image quality. Like I said, my favorite camera to use still to this day is my XSI, and I love the images from that. So that goes to tell you that I don't really care about this pixel peeping and all this other kind of stuff. I shoot JPEG. It's no big deal. I love my images that come out of it. And any image that you're going to see that I post up is from JPEG. So if you like them, just know that that's what you can get straight out of camera for any of these kind of cameras. But as far as the specs and the functions of this thing, everything just was really on point with what tilt out screen. And I like the fact that you can fold it in on itself, which I used to do on the 60D as well to protect it. All the controls are on this side right here. You're using SD card, which I prefer. And it was just honestly really great. Really great camera, at least for my liking. But I didn't get heavy into it because at that time when I bought it after right before my kids were born actually, and I wanted to use it to be taking good photos of them, get deeper into the hobby, and I never got a chance to. Everything just became all about the kids, and I took a couple photos, but it just became like the cell phone is always on hand and all that kind of nonsense, and I just kind of faded. I didn't get into it the way I wanted to. Recently though, so I had it just sitting for a while. Then I went through a whole bunch of other stuff going on in life stuff. So I didn't realize, so I faded back out of photography, even though I purchased it. I never really had a chance to really use it like that. So coming back into photography again now, about maybe a year ago, I was like, okay, I'm coming back into it. I want to get a couple of lenses that I've always wanted. I had a couple on my list. And the main thing now that I was dealing with full frame was I needed a new wider lens because that Sigma here wasn't going to work anymore for a wide, because that was only for the EF for the crop body. So it worked for my 60D, it worked for my XSI, but it's not going to work for my full frame. And little sidebar, I just realized, I think that wide Sigma lens I bought just before I got the 60D, and I used it on the XSI a couple times. Then I started using it on the 60D. I think I got it before the 60D, I can't remember. But anyway, that works for the XSI, but it doesn't work for the full frame, the 60 Mark II. So I was like, I have to get one. I started doing some research. At this time, you had Sigma art lenses, and Sigma's always been a good brand. But at this point in time, this is like last year, they're even better now than they were back then, because now their art series lens is like the equivalent of Canon's L series lens, sometimes even better. So I was searching for a wide angle lens, and I stumbled upon two that I was really considering for full frame, because once again, the 17 to 40 came into play as an option, but I'm like 17, even on a full frame that makes it wide, is still not wide enough, because my Sigma, the wide Sigma on a crop body comes out to like 12.8. And so I'm like, I need something that's at least like 14. It can't be, more, it can't be any less than 14 on terms of the wide end. Not less than meaning like more wider, but meaning more longer. It can't be more telephoto than 14 millimeters, because I'm like, that's just not going to work for me, coming from something that goes the equivalent of almost 13, 12.8. So 12.8 equivalent. So I looked at Sigma, and Sigma had in their art series a 14 to 24, 2.8, and then they had the 12 to 24 f4. And like I said before, I've always been fine with the f4, especially when it comes to landscape, because I'll either be using a tripod or I'll be hand holding it, but I'm steady hand holding it. It's not like I need fast action, like something's moving. So I had purchased this one because it's wider. So I prefer the 2 millimeters wider over having to 2.8. And everybody's different what they prefer, but the quality on this lens is amazing. It feels good in the hand. It's super heavy. It just looks amazing. And you see it has that bulbous side as well to it, the front element. It's very clean because it's one of the more newer lenses. This one was actually, like I said before, purchased from B&H as used. I got this for about $900, and I want to say maybe $80. Its normal price is supposed to be like $1,100 maybe, or $1,200. But what's awesome about it is it was completely brand new, but somebody bought it and returned it, so it counted as being used. So it was amazing. I definitely suggest you guys going on B&H if you want to find used glass or even used camera bodies, because the condition labeler that they say it really is very helpful. So this right here, like I said, I purchased this, and I really actually like it. The focal range gives me exactly what I wanted. It gives me pretty much the same field of view at 12. It's actually wider than what my other Sigma was. So it's really good in that aspect, in that regard. And I just really love it, to be honest with you. I used it on a trip that I took one time, but to be honest, since I didn't really get back into photography in the way that I wanted to yet, I used it, but I didn't really get back out there like that. So I do want to have a day where I go out and just maybe take some shots, nature, city location, whatever the case is, as I'm slowly getting back into photography now. But I'm really happy that I got to purchase that lens, because it's kind of rounding off my full frame lineup. A lot of the lenses I already had roll right into the full frame, but that I kind of needed. So I don't need more telephoto, because my other Sigma covers me for that, even for full frame. But as far as wider, I need it. Then last, and I purchased this recently, I've always wanted the 50D. I'm sorry, I always wanted the 50 millimeter 1.2. I always wanted this lens for the 1.2, but it never made sense to justify it because I already had the nifty 50. I'm sorry, I forgot a lens. Let me backtrack. Before I got that Sigma wide one, maybe about 2019 maybe, I bought this to replace the Nifty 50 because I was like, I want to have a 50 millimeter that's not plastic. This is only $125. I says, might as well. I just bought the 60D maybe a year before. And I was like, I 60D Mark II. And then I was like, I just want to kind of upgrade my lineup a little bit, where that Trinity that I have of the 28, which I was still using it was hard to get used to it on the 6D Mark II, but it actually was still really nice once I got used to it. But I wanted to upgrade the 50 millimeter because where this has plastic mount, I don't like exposing that for too long. This has metal mount. The body just feels better quality. It feels less plasticky. It's like a better plastic. The focusing ring is electronic, but it feels very smooth. So right now it goes smooth and it's easy to turn. But if I was had the camera on right now, this right here you'd have to put it into manual, and then when you turn it, you'd feel it would manually focus almost like an electronic lever. Like this acts like an electronic lever. So, but really good. I enjoyed the upgrade. It was actually supposed to be better optically by a little bit, not a whole lot, because the other one was still very good, but it felt nice. But the truth is, though I always liked that focal length on the crop bodies when I used the 28 millimeter on the Rebel body and any of my crop bodies, going to the 6D, which full frame, I should have enjoyed that same length, because the 28 on the crop body was 44 millimeters equivalent. The 50 millimeter obviously on here is 50 millimeters on the full frame. So it should have been fine. For some reason, I started fading away from that and still just being more comfortable with the 28. And I don't know why. Once I got adjusted to it, I thought it was gonna be too wide. Then I started enjoying it. And I was like, I'm cool with this. But there was a little bit of a pickle. And that was the fact that I've always wanted the 50 millimeter 1.2. I never could justify it, which is why at the time when I did upgrade to the newer Nifty 50, it is the 50 millimeter STM. So the focusing is very silent and it's more made for video, which is why I'm still gonna always like use this one and keep this one around for my main setup. Not main setup, like use it all the time, but still, you know, I still would never get rid of it just for that reason, that it has its differences. But nonetheless, and that was actually considered build wise not the equivalent of the 51.4, but like they said, it took sharper photos. It was almost the equivalent in its quality, because as far as build quality, because at least had a metal mount now instead of plastic. But I still couldn't shake that I always wanted this. But the thing that became an issue right now at that moment was that mirrorless had been running now for a bit of time. And but the beginning was just kind of starting off around the time I got the 6D Mark II. It was because I got the 60 Mark II about a year after it already was released. And I got it refurbished, actually. I paid for that about $1,200 maybe at the time. And I think the regular was going for like $1,400 maybe. So I got a decent deal on it. I think 1,400, maybe 1,500. So I'm not too sure, but at this point now, I only bought this lens actually maybe about 2 weeks ago or something of that sort. It started getting to a point where I already knew from even the time that I got the 60 Mark II that mirrorless was starting to try to make its way in, but it wasn't there yet. A couple of years later, maybe like 2020, 2021, it was in full effect, and it was like, okay, I may not be able to get a good copy of this ever again, because now that you can still buy it new, but new, it's super expensive. I was like, let me just jump on it. And I bought it used. I bought it for about 900, and I want to say I either bought it for like 890, high 800s, but I know after tax it went into the 900 range. I always wanted it and I had to jump on it. So I bought it because it used to, back in the days when people used to have the 5D Mark II and they used to have that on it, they used to say the portraits were amazing with that f1.2, but they would always say sometimes you can't even fully get it to focus because the depth of field was so shallow. But nonetheless, if you got it going the way you wanted to, it was just super creamy. The background was just amazing, it's dreamy. And I was just like, I always wanted a piece of that. I love the 50 millimeter focal length. At least on the crop bodies, I always loved it, even though I was shooting at really a 44, which is a little bit wider. In theory, and it's funny because I put the 50 millimeter on there now, and I got so used to the 28 on it that it's hard to get back used to it. But nonetheless, I've been shooting with it because of that 1.2 is just amazing. I got to kind of get used to it, but it does create this background blur that is just insane. And I just want to really dive into, once again, as I dive back into photography, I want to do it with that lens. I always wanted it. So I'm so glad I have it. And so for that reason, as I mentioned, I believe earlier in the video, I am never going to fade from the EF lineup and these type of cameras because I have this lens collection. I was late to buying certain things like the 50 millimeter or that very wide angle Sigma for full frame. And so, you know, when I bought the 50 millimeter, I even said, even during the time when I bought the wide angle Sigma, I said to myself, the 12 to the 24, I said to myself, do I want to go into mirrorless right now? I could get a converter for these and go into mirrorless, but the mirrorless equivalent. So if I was to later on buy the 50 millimeter at the time, I was saying to myself, which I knew I wanted to get that, and I was buying the wide angle, I was like, the 50 millimeter for the RF line is like 2,500, while this one brand new is 1,500. And obviously if you got it on sale or something like that, it was less. Now recently it went on sale to like 1,300 brand new. So when I bought it used, that's why the used price was a little bit cheaper at 800 some change. And this one was considered like a 9 in terms of its condition, not a 9 plus, but I think a 9, which it pretty much is like pretty much just about perfect, some just minor wear on it. But it came with this little pouch and it came with its lens hood, but it didn't come with the box. I have all the boxes to all of my lenses other than this one's the only one I don't have a box to, because when it came with just some generic box. But other than that, I save all my boxes. It probably doesn't make sense to do that, but if I ever was to sell all mine, because all my lenses that I bought initially were all in mint condition. So if I ever wanted to sell them, I could sell them like new. Other than my 28, which now has sticky to it, which sucks, but I would never get rid of this lens anyway. I just love it so much. So yeah, so I would never get rid of any of these lenses because like I said, it'd be too hard to acquire such a lineup ever again in terms of I'd have to switch over to mirrorless. It'd be a whole hassle. And the cameras, they take perfectly good photos. So there's no need for me to ever do that. I am going to give away my 10D to somebody, one of my family members at some point in time. I just don't want to keep it. It's not anything's wrong with it. It's a great camera too. I just personally don't like the idea of having too many camera bodies. And I have 3 camera bodies that are my own that I use. The XSI, the 60D, which I'm gonna grab as soon as I get a chance to at a storage, and then my 60 Mark II. So the last purchase that I made, which actually came in to today, the time that I'm filming this, is and I put this on here recently because I bought these to put on my 6D, and I just like these. I've always done this since years. I had this on my Rebel. I've been doing this since like 2000 and probably 10 or something like that. I bought this off eBay, $58. After tax, it came up to $63. I was familiar with the 40D because of the 50D, but I was familiar with when it came out when I had my XSI because these two ran side by side and it was like the bigger brother of my XSI. It came out a little bit before the XSI. It's got a 10 megapixel sensor. The menus on it are the exact same. The screen resolutions also the exact same, 3-inch screen. This person put some kind of custom thing on it here, but it doesn't take away from the It doesn't take away from the, you being able to see it, whatever. I think it's a more reinforcement. I don't know. But I was hoping from the pictures that I saw online that the quality would be good on this and it wouldn't be scuffed up or anything like that. This thing is in mint condition. The only thing, it didn't come with an eyepiece, and I purchased that on Amazon for like about $6.99. It was a 2-pack. It came with 2 of them. So right there just makes this look like new, because this piece is new. You could see here as I go over the camera, it is perfectly in like mint condition. Little dust right there. I'm going to use a toothbrush to try to get some of that out of there. The handle just has some of that kind of like, little, I don't know what you want to call that, decay kind of markings that get on there with that kind of little, like, it starts getting similar to the ashiness on the whiteness on my lens over there. No different than that. It feels the same. It's still mint condition. It just gets a little bit of that visual ashiness on it. Other than that, there's no scuff marks on this. And the only part in this entire camera that has any bit of scuff marks at all, this is pretty much a brand new mint condition. It's mint. The only area where it has any scuff mark at all is right there. That's the only scuff mark. And the only reason why that's there too is because there were these, it looks like those kind of rings that would be on a key holder, like a key holder ring. They had these small ones on here for this other type of clamp they were using. And I didn't like it. I took it off, and it didn't even have the piece it connects with to even wrap it around your neck. It's supposed to be like a neck piece, but it's like 2 clamps, one on this side, one on this side. And I guess you would attach them to the main clamp to go around your neck, and you could take them off when you wanted. I took them off. This is probably made just because of that rubbing. That's it. Because obviously if there's no other wear anywhere else, you're not going to just happen to have bumped your camera there. And you can see right here, that just came from that same little ring. But that's it. Other than that, this is complete mint condition. Now, I don't know if they had to replace this or they just put this on it as reinforcement. I'm not too sure about that, but it feels nice. It works. It's no big deal. I don't even know. I might even magnify actually, because when I turn this on, and it came with a battery, but it didn't come with a box or anything else. This looks very clear on the back. So I don't know if it magnifies it or whatever the case is. I feel like it looks a little more clear than my XSI, which, let me see. Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but let me turn this one on too. Put it on menu. I don't know if it's just me or maybe just the colors work. I don't know if it's gonna pick up on camera. But when I'm looking at them, I guess they look the same. I don't know, for some reason, maybe it's just that screen has magnification. I don't know. But anyway, they're the same menu. I know how to use it. Perfectly the same. They're the same internal menu, same resolution of the back screen. It's just that this was just a bigger brother, more sportier. And I still can't believe how good the condition is for what I got it for. Sometimes you find gems, and this is one of them. It didn't come with a CFS card, but I had this CFS card from my 50D. I only bought one, and then other than that, I had a converter one, one of those, I forget the term, not converter, but you know what I mean, where you put the SD card in it, and then it's a shell of a CF card, and you put the SD card in it. We'll just call it a converter for lack of a better word right now, because I'm having a brain fart. Adapter, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a CF adapter from a CF to a SD to CF card. And I bought that before, but when I gave that away, I gifted that because I knew that the person who was using it would more likely be able to buy SD cards than they would know. They weren't too familiar with cameras to buy this. And I knew that if I ever needed this, I'll just keep this one. And that's all I ever needed. If I ever needed to shoot or use it, that's all I need is that 1 gig. I don't need anything more than that. I actually had a couple of 2 older ones though that are like 512 megabytes, because when I bought older cameras, one of them came with 2 of those 512 megabyte ones. And I actually put one of them inside the 10D right now when I was shooting with it. But this is the only one I really need is 1 gig. That's good enough, and it's fast. It's a nice quality one. So the reason why I purchased this 40D, was because I wanted to get my sons into photography. They saw me shooting some pictures with them during the holidays, and I was taking pictures of them. This is recently during like the Halloween time and whatnot. And so one of my sons looked like he was interested, and he was like, daddy, oh, I want to see the camera. Can I shoot with the camera? Blah, blah, whatever the case is. So right away I said to myself, let me get him a camera. So I went online, and it's funny because looking at videos of the 5D Classic, and a part of me almost wanted that just to kind of double purpose, get it for my son and also get it for myself. But, I was like trying to gauge. I was like, I can get a Rebel. I didn't want to get, the perfect one would have been getting another XSI, because I'm so familiar with it. I think it's a great camera, but I also didn't want to have one that would get mixed up with mine. Then also too, the prices on them, I felt were not at, like, for that same price, I could get a slightly better camera because they weren't like $20 in price. And so, I was like, okay, it's not like $20 or $30. I don't want to get it because there are other cameras that are $50, $60 that are slightly better. Like, the image quality of this and the image quality of the 40D are pretty much the same. This is 12 megapixel sensor. That's a 10 megapixel sensor. But as far as image quality, they're both going to be the same. But since that has so much more extra with it, or any other cameras I saw that were a little bit better in terms of function, I was like, if this is going to cost the same price as something that's a little higher, I'm just going to get the other one. So as I was looking around, looking at prices of other things, like, no, I don't want something that is too old, because something like the 10D, which I could have gave my son the 10D, the screen is small. He's only 7 years old. He's not going to be able to see it. The screen is small. The functions, not that he's just going to use mostly auto anyway, but if he used to grow into it later, I feel like there's not as much room to grow into that. Now, someone who's nostalgic can pick up a 10D and enjoy it, and there's no problem. I'm not knocking the camera at all in any way. But at the same time, for someone who's younger, I feel like they won't be able to grow into it the same as something a little bit more modern. It doesn't have to be super modern. So I was like, okay, and for that same price, like, not a price because I wouldn't have to buy a 10D, I already have it. But I was like, I took a look at a 50D. That was a little bit more expensive, and I also didn't want to get another 50D because I had a 50D. There's something about that bites me to know I gave away a 50D. Back then, it was good purpose, but now it's like, okay, so I saw the 40D, and I was like, this is a great camera. It's the bigger brother to this one, and the specs on it are good. You can grow into it, and it lasts forever because it's just a solid camera. Like, I use my XSI still, and I have no problem using it. So I knew we could grow into that, and it wouldn't be where it was too dated for him. But at the same time, the price was so good, and I just prayed that it was as in good condition as it looked on the photos. Because I've seen some of them that had, ripped up. Not that I would ever use these, and not that I'm ever going to move this around because it might break, but this part was ripped off, and just scuffs marks everywhere. I'm like, I don't want that. So I hope this one is in good condition. And it happened to be in good condition. I didn't do the 5D Mark I because it was going usually for above $200. And I kind of would have enjoyed that just to see myself what that's like, that kind of nostalgic, old school look to it, because they say it's almost like digital film. But at the same time, I actually reckon that this and this might do the same thing, because I always felt that the XSI almost felt like it had film-like quality, because even when you kind of bump it up a little bit, between its dynamic range being somewhat low compared to modern cameras now, but it had this feel that was like, when I pump up the ISO, it gets this kind of nice fine grain to it. And it's like, it might be giving that same pleasantries that people speak of when they speak of the 5D Classic, but I don't know because I never had the 5D Classic. So I kind of got my head out of that space. But then also too, I said to myself, I don't want to spend $200 on a camera that, for my son, he doesn't need that. I'm just looking at that because I want to play with that. I'm like, let me get away from that because I already have a 60 Mark II. So let me not get into that space that got me into this place in the first place when it came to just buying a bunch of cameras just to be getting like things that I didn't necessarily need. So it's like, let me dial it back. So that's when I settled on the 40D, and I think it was the perfect buy at that price. It was, like I said, after tax, $63. It was like $58 before tax. Mint condition, great. So I'm so happy with that. So now both of my sons, one of them took a liking to it, but I have twin boys. Both of them can play with it if they want. Worst case scenario, if they both end up really liking it, I will either get them another camera or whatever the case is. Now, granted, in their small hands, this would have been better, but like I said, the only one that I tried to look up the next models up from this, like the I think it was the T5i. I don't know if I have that right. T5i, I think it is, a TSI. The next one that came after this, that was the equivalent sensor of the 60D and and the 7D, and it was more expensive than a 40D. And at that point, I'm like, yes, that's better for his hands and his size, whatever. But I'm like, I'm paying, it was almost like something like $100 something, and I'm like, or low hundreds. And I'm like, why would I pay that? Or even like 90 something in bad condition. And it was like, why would I pay that when I can get a 40D? I'd rather the 40D for the price I'm paying, and his small hands will grow into that. I don't know if he'll be able to handle it right now. Maybe he can, hopefully. I hope it's not too hard for him, but nonetheless, I really love the purchase I got, and he'll be able to grow into it. And it's such a pro body that professionals used this back in the days for sports, back when I had my XSI, when I was using my XSI, primarily. And it honestly, if it was good enough then for those things, it's good enough now. 6.5 frames per second, 10 megapixels is more than enough to blow up something with huge blown up poster size. The screen is good enough for you to see what you took a picture of and understand what you took a picture of. It's not something where it's like that bad where you're like, oh, I can't make out what I'm looking at. No, it's not the best, but it's still usable. And yeah, it's everything you need. Like, honestly, it's everything that you could need, and the images on it are fantastic. The ISO should be no different than how the XSI was. And like I said, this goes up to the high of 32. It has a H level, a high level of 32, which I took a trial photo with it. Not in the greatest conditions, but it looks good to me so far. But nonetheless, this at 1600 always was great to me. So the image quality on that should be fantastic, and you grow into it and should be perfect. So that was my journey of my photography hobby, which I'm, like I said, planning on to get back into it more again. It's something that I really love, and I was happy to be able to share this with you guys. Once again, going back to the point of it all, you guys need to get into some kind of hobby, no matter what it is. Get into something that you could spend your time getting into. I do not suggest that you guys spend a lot of money on whatever hobby you get into. Unless you have the money for it, then do so. But don't let the hobby get the best of you. But honestly, I would say, yeah, you got to get into something, because when you don't have nothing that you get into, you kind of get lost. You fall into just wanting to do work all the time because that's all you have. That's all you know. And enjoyment shouldn't be work. Hobbies should be separate from your job, and you should have them, enjoy them. They should be a big part of your life, and make that something that is important to you. Make it something that's on the top of your list. One other thing I forgot, so I want to go back to this. I had mentioned if I could do it all over again, what would be the lenses that I would get? If I could consolidate my lenses where I never bought them in the first place, so I'm not going to sell them just to sell them, that I have them, because there's no point in that. But if I can go back in time and consolidate to just the lens lineup that suited me, I would say this, regardless of whether I have full frame or not, this wouldn't have really changed much necessarily, even though on the wide end, that was the one lens where because I didn't have full frame, whatever. For the most part, if I had to consolidate to have just one lineup, and we'll say it's suiting for right now's time. I have a full frame, I have crop, and I want the lenses that match up for all of that at the same time. It is what it is. I would say that lens would be a must. I would have my 28, 1.8, the 50, 1.2. Like I said, this one I would have this Sigma for my wide angle. And this is going to be wide even on the crop at 12. Even if you multiply that, it's not as wide as the other Sigma was, but it's still wide if I needed to do that. So that would kind of really be all I would need for that. Surprisingly, I would actually have this in my lineup now, because I appreciate it more now than I did then. The reason why is because it covers a couple of things. I would use this for portraits of when I just want to get on some, like zoom in on somebody's like head area, and I didn't, like if I really want to blow out for portraits, I would use this. But if I wanted to kind of have that zoom range, instead of having 100 millimeter, 85 millimeter, this and that, I would just use this. And at the f4, I'm fine with that. It doesn't have to always be the most blurry background. And I'll have a lens for that, which will be this. So this, for the most part, will be my lineup that I would be fine with. Just these 5 right here. I almost thought to myself, oh, throw in the 85. I would never use this. And that's what this would be used for. In terms of wildlife photography, I would get by on this. If I need to crop, I can crop, especially since this has, so the 60D had, I want to say the 60D had 18 megapixels, at 18 megapixels, which was high enough. It really was pretty high. The 50D had 15, the 60D had 18 megapixels, was the equivalent of the 7D as well. They both had the same sensor. The 60 Mark II has 26 point something megapixels, so 26 megapixels. On the full frame, I can crop in. Cropping in still doesn't give me the equivalent of the 18 megapixels already cropped by the 60D, but nonetheless, if I had my main 3 bodies, which is my Rebel XSI, the 60D, and the 60 Mark II, I would utilize those with these lenses in combination, where if I needed more range, I would just use my 60D, but I would make this a staple lens. Which, like I said, is interesting because at that time earlier on, I didn't understand the value of this lens because it was all over the place. The only other lens that I would say I would probably want within this lineup, but I wouldn't necessarily need it because I don't know how much I would use it, would be my really big Sigma back here. Because if I did need extra long focal length, that jump is so further from this thing or any other lens that is such a significant difference. That's such a specialized lens. But that would be the lens that I would take out by itself with nothing else. So I will then just add it into that mix. If I had to have my lineup, it's gonna be these 5, the 28, the 50, the 24, the 105, the 12 to 24, which goes very much hand in hand with finishing off where this lens is, and it's f4. So this is f4, that's f4, that's f4, and they all link up really nice. I would have those, and then I have this Sigma back here. And that would be my only lens lineup, not having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lenses that I wouldn't have. And I'm not even including that Tamron that's just going to get given away. So that would be the lineup. The only thing I would say now is that because I already have all my lenses, I'm never going to sell them, so there's no point. But what I probably might end up doing down the line is putting those other ones away. Once I get kind of situated, set up, I don't really have an area where I have like all my lenses displayed, maybe on a shelf that could be displayed in kind of a nice little display kind of thing. You know, maybe I'll see about setting something up like that. But if I did, what I'll probably end up doing is getting maybe a Ziploc bag, putting my lenses in Ziploc bags, those other ones that are behind that are not none of these. And I may just end up putting them away and just never using them again unless I ever needed to, or maybe one of my other lenses break. That might be an alternative, but that would be it. The only other lens that I would keep out is this one right here, the kit lens, the XSI, because this is such a good lens and it works so well with the XSI that I'll always use this. If I was purchasing lenses, that would be my lineup. And I say that because with my 6D Mark II, I don't really have a need to use this lens unless I'm specifically wanting to use the SXI. That's it. But other than that, it would just be these ones. But if I had, like I said, just a purchasing lineup and that's all I had, it would just be these. I'm not really including this one because this came with it as a kit. So I would have had that regardless. But yeah, everything else I never bought with a kit. So it would be just those and that. So that would be my lens lineup. So like I said, I'll probably end up bagging the other ones up because I probably won't end up really using them anymore. That way they'll stay maybe fresh because I'll never use them again. I'm glad most of them, I keep them stored inside like their regular, like a bag, like they're a camera bag. So most of them never had to worry about getting stickiness. And I'm glad about that. They got a little bit of ashiness on some of them, but they don't have stickiness except for the 28, which is the one I was using a lot. So maybe this came from a combination of being exposed to the sun every now and then and being used and this and that and my greasy fingers on them. Maybe that's what caused it. I don't know. But yeah, it's the only one that didn't go the route of ashy and it went sticky. Anyway, you guys, as always, be safe, take care, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.